How do you install Linux on a cat? My name is Amphy, and I have almost exclusively used Linux on my personal computers for the past 6 months. I have had to explain my Linux experience numerous times to different people, so I'm making this video so that I can send them to watch this instead of me having to explain it to them every single time. I've done the work, I've tried a ton of distributions, and here is everything that I wish that I knew before I started. So, why Linux? I'm not going to be going back to Windows anytime soon. Windows 11 is a bloated mess. And when I go to work and I have to use the computers at work, I have to use Windows. And every day I get reminded why I hate Windows. Full of ads, bloatware, and constant reminders and intrusions that I do not want to see. And frankly, the performance on Windows is just not that good anymore. It is an absolute CPU and RAM hog, even at idle, and there is a concerning and increasing amount of telemetry that is getting harder and harder to turn off. When I boot into Linux, the only things that run are what I installed. The computer gets out of my way and lets me do what I need to do. No intrusions, no ads, everything just works. On Linux, you have actual full access over absolutely everything in your computer, and if there's something you don't like, you can just change or remove it. No Edge, no Microsoft pestering me to log in constantly, no Copilot, just my computer. And on Linux, my CPU usage at idle never leaves the single digits. The way that updates work on Linux is just way better. It makes way more sense. And it's overall just a simpler, more cohesive experience with very few drawbacks, for at least my use case. This stuff is exactly what I'm talking about. I literally had to boot into Windows for like one thing on my PC, and I've been sitting here waiting for this update to finish, this security update that I needed to install, for like over 5 minutes. It might have even been longer. This is like, bro, they're not even like a percentage or anything. It's just updates are underway. Please keep your computer on. It's like, bro. And anyone who knows about my last videos know that I care a lot about my data privacy. Windows telemetry and forced logins have both gotten really ridiculous, and most Linux distributions have almost zero telemetry, and the ones that do are almost all opt-in instead of being opt-out. A lot of people are concerned about the difficulty of learning Linux, especially with all the memes of installing your web browser on Linux. One of the most remarkable things about my Linux journey was how unremarkable it was. I almost never have to use the terminal, and I almost never think about that I'm using Linux anymore. I just turn on my PC and I do the task that I turn my PC on for. Let's talk about what most people are concerned about, compatibility. For the most part, everything that I have wanted to use and play has worked with very minimal tweaks. I've had to find some alternatives for some of the programs that I have used, but for the most part, it is not that intrusive. For games, Steam has Proton, which is a compatibility layer for Linux that lets it run native Windows games. A website called ProtonDB or Proton Database has a tool that shows how well your Steam library will run on Linux. So far, I have had only 2 games that I have wanted to play that straight up don't work on Linux: Fortnite and Battlefield 6. And for these, I will actually admit, I personally dual boot Windows 11, meaning that I have both Linux and Windows installed on my PC, and I can swap between them as I need. Honestly, the number of times that I've actually swapped to play these games has been shockingly infrequent. I will say that if there are games that you want to play very frequently that fundamentally don't work on Linux, then Linux just might not be for you. Games like Valorant, Destiny 2, PUBG, and others with kernel-level anti-cheats are completely non-functional. Non-Steam games can either be added to Steam and then set to use Proton as a compatibility layer, and most of the time it literally just works. Here's me playing this Time Splitters fan game using Proton, and it literally just works when I press play. For Epic Games or other game stores, there's Lutris and the Heroic Games launcher. both of which can play games from your Epic library and other libraries. All of my retro console emulators work just as good, if not better, than on Windows, and I've been able to mod my games with no difficulty. Sometimes there are extra steps on Linux, but most games are fairly seamless. And if you do have issues with the game, ProtonDB or somewhere on the internet probably has the fix. I've been able to find a fix for every single game that I've wanted to play. So how did I choose my distribution on Linux? Choosing your distro can be extreme choice paralysis because of just how many choices that you have. So far, I have tried Ubuntu, Kubuntu, Fedora, Mint, EndeavourOS, CachyOS, Bazzite, PopOS, OpenSUSE, and SteamOS on the Steam Deck. If you're going to start using Linux, I recommend either Fedora or Bazzite, and frankly, I find it really difficult to recommend anything else at this point. And if you don't like that opinion, it probably means that you already really know what you're doing, and you should just go install Arch. Fedora is a distro that is sponsored by Red Hat and maintained by the community, and it strikes an incredible balance between stability and new features. Fedora comes in two primary flavors, Workstation and KDE. There are others, but that's for your own research if you'd like. I'm going to focus on these two for this video. Personally, I use Fedora KDE, which uses the KDE Plasma desktop. Growing up, my favorite operating system was Windows 7, and you can even see me using it in my really old videos. Windows 7 had a lot of the same kinds of features that I just described before. It was just your computer, no frills. The KDE Plasma desktop is very Windows-like, and it reminds me so much of what I loved about Windows 7, but with all of the modern features and compatibilities of a modern operating system. It is a familiar-looking taskbar and has customizable widgets for the desktop. Now, what is Fedora Workstation? Fedora Workstation uses GNOME, which is a different desktop environment, which is less Windows-like and closer to something like Mac or even Android, or even just its own experience. I personally don't like GNOME, but it's all up to preference. And pretty much everything else between these two flavors of Fedora will be the same. And this goes with a lot of different versions within one Linux distribution. On any version of Fedora, installing and updating software is very simple, so much more simple than on Windows. For most programs, gone are the days of Googling the program's name and downloading an exe. Instead, you can just use the included App Store to download and update everything on your PC, including your drivers. By the way, I do recommend enabling third-party repositories when you first boot up Fedora, as it will let your OS download proprietary drivers for your hardware, such as NVIDIA GPU drivers. And I have a laptop with an RTX 4050, and just updating Fedora gives me the latest drivers automatically, and everything just works. That's actually easier than on Windows, because on Windows I have to go manually install GeForce Experience or go search down the driver and install it there. But with this, it just detects it and it's just baked into my operating system. Now, my other option would be Bazzite. Bazzite is based on Fedora, but it's really focused on gaming. You can still do other tasks on it, anything you can do with a regular PC, but it is a gaming-first operating system. It comes with drivers and game launchers like Steam, pre-installed, and it also has an optional home theater version that lets you boot directly into Steam Big Picture mode, acting very similar to the Steam Deck. But if you want to just boot into your regular desktop, that's fine as well. Bazzite is a little different than regular Fedora, as it is an immutable distribution. Immutable means that the core system files of Bazzite are read-only and cannot easily be changed. SteamOS on the Steam Deck works very similar in this way. For most users, this could actually be a good thing. You can still install all of your regular programs like Discord, OBS, emulators, etc. If you're a power user and you want to do something a little more unusual, like install something from GitHub or something like that, it is less flexible and you may encounter some roadblocks doing that. However, it does mean that the chance of breaking your system is very low because core system files and drivers are baked into your operating system. I use Bazzite on my home theater PC because it is a single use case device. I use the Steam gaming mode version of Bazzite, and it has quite literally made it feel like a console. I don't even remember the last time that I had to use my keyboard and mouse for anything on Bazzite because everything just works on my controller. Bazzite gives the same two options as Fedora for the desktops, KDE and GNOME, and that is up to your personal preference as I mentioned before. Now, you can try either of these operating systems alongside many others without installation or any commitment with the website DistroSea. Just want to be very clear that I am not sponsored by this at all. Just look up the distro that you want to try, then the desktop environment, wait in the queue, and then wait for it to boot. And this is a great way to get a basic feel of how a distro looks and feels before actually installing it on your PC or in a VM. Please note that this runs online and on a low-powered server, so the low performance and frame rate that you see on DistroSea is not indicative of your actual experience on your PC. Now, there are some distros that I specifically don't recommend with a few asterisks. Linux Mint is commonly recommended as a starting point for Linux, and I like Mint. However, at the time of recording, Mint is really lacking in a lot of modern features. It has bad multi-monitor support, no HDR, and no variable refresh rate support. If you're on a lower power, single monitor device that won't really play games, Mint might be a good choice. But as I said, this video is for my friends and people that I know, and I really wouldn't recommend Mint to my friends. Maybe I'd recommend it to my parents. Ubuntu and Kubuntu are both okay and have a really great install base. They are usually running really behind on updates, just like Mint, and I can't think of a single reason that I would want to use Ubuntu over Fedora. PopOS is okay, but the idea that it's best for NVIDIA is literally misinformation. NVIDIA drivers just work on almost all modern Linux distributions now. All you have to do is just update your OS and it just works. CachyOS is a great operating system and based on Arch, but I only recommend it for people who prefer to use the terminal over using a standard desktop app and are not afraid of getting into the weeds with Linux. I'm not your dad.
Please turn down FL, it's extremely loud. I'm not your dad!
And you can try out other operating systems on DistroSea, or even just install it or use it on a live USB just to try it. I'm going to have all the links to everything I mentioned down in the description, and if at this point you still really don't know where to start, I recommend to follow the Bazzite install guide, which I will have in the description. Or if you know me personally, just shoot me a message or put a comment down below and I'll answer any questions that you have. Thank you. Have a great rest of your day. This is Amphy. Peace out.